welcome. My name is Maureen Scanlon-Failer, and I'm president of the Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. And I'd like to welcome all of you here this morning to our Business Matters. Where's our Donaldson? Oh, there we are. It's not a Business Matters, Safety Matters if we don't have our friends from Donaldson equipping here. Anyways, but thank you all for coming. This is a wonderful program that we put on here at the Chamber in partnership with the Bloomington Police Department. And I'll be introducing Jeff. Jeff, are you going to be introducing us? Okay. But we've been doing this program now for 4 or 5 years. Well,
about 6.
6. Okay, yeah. Time flies when you're having fun here at the Chamber. But it is really a wonderful program. Public safety is very, very important and a top priority of the Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. And we need to ensure that all of our chamber members and our businesses in the community have the resources, the tools, and the knowledge to have a safe work environment for your employees, but for your customers as well. So we feel very strongly about our Business Matters, Safety Matters program. And we really owe a lot to Chief Potts and his department by pulling these programs together for us. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Potts, and he will introduce our speaker.
Sure. Thanks, Maureen. And as Maureen said, I'm Jeff Potts, the police chief. Just want to welcome everybody this morning to another edition of our Business Matters, Safety Matters program. We've been doing this, as Maureen said, for it does go by fast, 5, 6 years, something like that. But we've done about 20. And really the value of this program is in how you guys feel about it. And so after doing about 20 of them, we're searching for ideas. Maybe we need to start repeating some of them. Maybe there's other topics out there. I was just talking with Brian here, who I think might be a first-time attendee here, or have you been to?
First time for the Commerce.
But he gave us a good idea in light of the Philandro Castillo case, maybe a presentation on what people should do when the police, when you come in contact with the police, and that's an idea for a future program. But we also want to hear from you, especially from you as it relates to your business. What kind of information do you want to hear? We've done crisis planning, we've had even canine demonstrations. So we've done them to kind of be educational. We've also done them to show you, to show our community a little bit of some of the resources that we have. So if you do have ideas, please pass them along to Anna, or if you know Heidi Miller at the police department, I think some of you do, let us know what you want to hear. We want to keep you coming back. We want to build this program even bigger. It is really kind of our, we built it in the model of Neighborhood Watch, where we have roughly 350 organized neighborhood watch groups around Bloomington. A national night out, we had over 350 neighborhood watch parties. We feel like we've got good connections in those neighborhoods, and we're really just trying to replicate that on the business side. Some 2,000, 3,000 businesses, if you count them all, in Bloomington. We just want to keep building relationships there so that you dealing with the police isn't such an odd thing. I got a friend over there. I have somebody that I've talked to several times, and it makes that connection go a lot smoother, and people feel a lot more comfortable reaching out to us. So that's the basis of the program. If you have ideas, please let us know. You're in for a good presentation today. Jim Cowie here, I'll introduce him as an ex-Bloomington police officer. I think he spent 17 years with us. He came to us from Carrollton, Texas, where he was a police officer for 10 years. Well-experienced police officer. He's done a lot of work in the area of crime prevention. I just heard that now he's going to go back to Texas, and he'll probably tell you a little bit about that, to teach police officers in Texas probably a lot of what he learned up here in Minnesota. So we were very glad to have him for 17 years in the Bloomington Police Department. We're glad to have him back today to talk a little bit about the Crime Stoppers program. So Jim, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jeff. Or sir.
Whatever you want.
When I started in Bloomington, he was one of my field training officers. So now I have to salute. I think.
He might have been training me. He had a lot more experience.
No. Oh. Well, thanks for inviting me to come in and talk today. The reason that I'm here is actually to talk about Minnesota Crime Stoppers. And in this room, we just happen to have 3 members of the Minnesota Crime Stoppers Board of Directors. We've got Mark Thorson over here, who's a member of the Chamber, and then Doug Belton over here, who also works community liaison with the Bloomington Police Department. So Bloomington's got some real good ties with Crime Stoppers and with working with the communities in a variety of different things. So I know I was kind of mingling a little bit before coming up here, and because I used to work here, and some of you look a little bit familiar. Unfortunately, sometimes when I think somebody's familiar, I might have them, I might have you look at me this way and then this way. But I didn't recognize exactly where it was that we met, but you really do look familiar, though. So, how many of you have heard of Crime Stoppers? Okay, Crime Stoppers have been around for a long, long time. In fact, if you remember back in the 70s, or actually late 70s, 80s. There used to be a Crime Stoppers TV show, part of the news, and everybody was very familiar with it. Then it kind of disappeared for a while. In the last couple of years, it's really been reorganized largely because of Bob Bossert over at Floyd and what used to be Hannon over there, right? They had an integral part in kind of revitalizing Crime Stoppers. In fact, the president of our board of directors is Bob Dennison, who used to work with you guys there. So I want to take just a moment here. When we start talking about the fear of crime, sometimes we don't really understand the impact that the fear of crime has in our communities. And if it has an impact in our communities, it has an impact with our employees and with our customers and how we do business. Last night I was doing a presentation out in Savage, not about Crime Stoppers, but we were just kind of talking about crime in general. And I said, I asked them, I said, how many of you know of the problems that occur downtown Minneapolis after midnight, right? Because no, maybe not you, but my mom used to tell me nothing good happens after midnight, right? You ever tell your own kids that? Okay. So I asked him, I said, knowing what goes on downtown Minneapolis, particularly, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, how many of you want to go downtown Minneapolis, like to E Block, at 2 o'clock in the morning? No one. No one. What we think is going on a lot of times has an impact in what we do. One of the researchers at the University of Northwestern University did a study here recently about the fear of crime, and he said the fear of crime is a social and political fact with concrete consequences for big city life. The costs of fear are both individual and collective. Fear can confine people to their homes, and it undermines their trust in their neighbors. Fear is a key quality of life issue for many people. Would you agree with that? Okay. More specifically, for business, when customers and even employees fear entering a commercial area, the viability of businesses located there is threatened. So part of what we're going to be talking about today is how can we make the people in our community feel safer so that they feel that they can go out and visit our businesses, so that they can go out and visit the parks, so that they can take walks and not be confined to their homes. Studies have shown that crime or the fear of crime has a negative effect on the community. So I've got on the next slide 3 of the top attendant behaviors. And by attendant behaviors, what I mean is if you are afraid of crime in your neighborhood, you might not leave your house. Okay? What do you think are some of those attendant behaviors? And if you give me a guess, I've got a junior police sticker badge here. You can't arrest anybody with it, but will it get you out of a ticket? Maybe not. Okay. Any ideas? What are some of the top attendant behaviors that the fear of crime affects?
Racial profiling?
Yeah, racial profiling could be one. Okay, there you go. What else? He's going to put it on his driver's license. Anyone else have any idea? If you were afraid of crime in your neighborhood, how might that affect what you do?
Going out at night?
Okay, yeah, going out at night. Can you hand that back to him? Don't keep it now.
Hey, arm myself, have a gun? Yeah. Weapons?
Hey, you know what? That's really good. In fact, I didn't even think of that. I'm going to give you two. All right. Studies have shown that the top 3 negative attendant behaviors are people stay home. They cocoon themselves in their houses. They avoid certain commercial or retail areas. Does that affect what we're talking about here this morning? Yes. They might even quit their jobs or move away. Now, none of us want to go back into the process of hiring new employees to replace somebody, but people do move or quit their job if they don't feel safe. In fact, just this morning on KSTP, they were talking about an area in St. Paul where there's been kind of an explosion in crime. St. Paul Police Department now has foot patrols going out to kind of mix and mingle with the community, and they talked about this area. It was south of Maryland Avenue, kind of between Payne and I'm not sure what the other street was, but in St. Paul, and they quoted a business owner who had a mechanical garage there for a number of years, and he said that he's afraid of the crime in the area, and he's moving his business out. None of us want to see that, okay? We don't have areas like that where people are really afraid of crime in Bloomington, do we? You know, thanks to, you know, the people, you know, like Doug and the chief here, who they put a very strong emphasis on creating a safe environment and controlling crime, right? But that could change, right? So, studies have shown. Give me a courtesy chuckle here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Studies have shown that when crimes are solved, that there's a positive attendant behavior. So one of the things that it does is that it creates social capital. Now, if you're a sociologist, you understand what social capital is. If you're not, you go, what in the world are they talking about? But social capital is not money. Social capital is a feeling of belonging in your community. If people feel safe, they get out of their house instead of staying inside. They get involved with youth sports, maybe coaching, instead of staying home and not going to the parks. They will go to the areas, they'll walk to a business area to do for commerce. That is social capital, okay? And it encourages others to report crime if they believe that crimes are actually being solved. And that's where Crime Stoppers comes in. Crime Stoppers is actually just one of the cogs in the wheel that makes our communities thrive. Let me explain why. Just recently, Vern Manners, he's the police chief up in Chisholm, Minnesota, they had a robbery. And in fact, you were at the board meeting when we were voting on, well, how much money do we pay the tip that came in? They had a robbery. It was solved from a tip that came through Crime Stoppers. And the quote from the chief was, "We could not have solved this crime without Crime Stoppers. Thank you." And that was from March of this last year. And I think, do you remember, I think it was like $650 that we gave the tipster on that, or that we authorized it, right?
Yep.
Okay. What Crime Stoppers does is it's not, well, I'll get to this here in a second. We are a 501c3, we're a nonprofit organization. In Minnesota, we were formed back in 1979. We work independently, but in partnership with law enforcement, okay? We're not the investigative agency. So when Doug comes to the meeting, when Mark comes to the meeting, we don't investigate crimes. But sometimes people think that we do, but we don't. We're also not McGruff. A lot of people think, but they'll come to a Crime Stopper meeting and they say, so where's McGruff, right? We're not McGruff. That's the National Crime Prevention Association. We are a free tip collection organization. We're a free phone and internet tip bank. We're a free source for reward funds. We're a free media source to publicize for you. And we're a known name that's in the community. Okay? What word keeps coming up over and over and over there? Free. Free. And we are. We work with any agency in the state of Minnesota. It doesn't matter if they have given us money. It doesn't matter. There isn't a contract that they sign. We work with them. If they are looking for tips and they don't have the funds in order to put together like a tip phone bank or whatever, we do, and we give that permission to utilize our services and everything that we have for free. So here's how we do it. Tipsters can anonymously contact us via text, internet, and phone. We don't even know. On the board of directors, we don't even know who the tipsters are because we have a third-party source that takes all of those tips. They're actually located down in Texas. A lot of the different states that have Crime Stoppers use the same tip source, the same web, the same phone number, everything. And it is completely anonymous. When somebody contacts our tip line, they're given a number, and we will never know who that person is. If that tip ends up in an arrest and that person qualifies for an award, here, hang on, just ignore me for a second. So ask me, how do you know how to give somebody the money? Okay, anybody have any questions at all?
How do you know when to give somebody the money?
Oh, you know what, I'm glad that you asked, thank you very much. The third-party sources down in Texas will contact them and say there will be an award that's out at, it could be at Target, could be at Walgreens, could be at the local bank. We're not going to say go to the local police department because sometimes our tipsters are not necessarily friendly to law enforcement, but they go to a third party out there and they have a number and they have to have that number to get their tip. We typically don't give out cash. We give out gift cards, okay? So everything is done completely anonymously. In many states, individual cities can use the same system, but they must pay for the services themselves. So like Kansas City has Kansas City Crime Stoppers. But there's fees and there's costs involved with running that organization, for the website, for the telephone tip line, for receiving the texts. That costs about, what is it, Doug? About you're the treasurer.
Can I know what service is that?
Yeah, the services down in Texas is about $8,000 or so.
Yeah, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, about $8,000 a year. So those cities that have their own Crime Stoppers tip organization have to pay for that. In Minnesota, there's only two groups that have Crime Stoppers: Rochester and Minnesota, the rest of us. Okay? Now we work with Rochester, but they have their own fundraising and they're okay with paying their $8,000. Everyone else, you don't have to pay that. If Bloomington wanted to have Bloomington Crime Stoppers, they could do that. But they got to fund all those services at a cost of about $8,000. Or they can just use our services. We do the fundraising, we do the collecting, we pay all those bills. So, in Minnesota, our nonprofit pays for the services and allows any agency to use them, our logo and our media contacts, and they don't have to ask. Last week I got a phone call from Minnetonka. Might have been about the burglaries that have been going on in Hennepin County, where people have been going into homes at night through the garage service door, or going into unlocked cars, taking the garage door opener, and then going in through the garage door. I don't know if you heard about that. But Minnetonka contacted us and they said, hey, we want to offer reward money and utilize and say contact Crime Stoppers. Can we do that? Yes, you can. And you don't have to ask. Just do it. It doesn't matter. You don't need our permission. Where do the funds come from? We get corporate donations from organizations like you, but I'm not asking for money, okay? But we do get corporate donations. Every year, Hubbard at Channel 5, they donate quite a bit of money to Crime Stoppers because they believe in it. And then we also contact law enforcement agencies across the state of Minnesota and say, you know what, if you can donate $150, we'll take it. And typically, the money here that we gain here pays all of our expenses. Now, if they don't want to pay that $150, we don't care. They can use our services anyhow. We have a bigger goal, okay? So, you want to talk a little bit here, Doug?
Sure. Okay, so how does it work? So in 2015, our tip volume was up 30% from 2014. What this means is that somehow or another we're getting the word out. People are learning about Crime Stoppers, just like you folks right here. This is important. This is the participatory or partnership end of what we do. I like the way that Jim framed this whole presentation in talking about what does it mean to have crime in an area, and what does it mean to reduce crime? How does it affect people and their habits, their behaviors, and whether or not they're willing to go out and enjoy all the amenities of a community? Well, as we get the word out about Crime Stoppers and people are aware of what we do, then that word gets around and we're actually able to use Crime Stoppers more. So, as people learn about our tip line and how easy it is to simply call in a tip and say, hey, I understand that you're looking for such and such a person. I saw them over at the mall. I saw them at the corner store. I saw them in the neighborhood. They give that tip. They call that tip in. We're able to get that tip right out to the law enforcement agencies that are looking for that individual, and they're able to allocate resources to get that person picked up, bring them into custody. So in 2014, we had a 30% increase, and in 2016, it was up 42%. And we're trying to improve on that. We're always trying to improve on that. And the idea is to really get the word out, make that name recognition so that people know who we are and what we do. Does it work? Top tip areas, drugs. A lot of the stuff that we get information on is drugs. Let's face it, if you have in your neighborhood, whether it's a commercial area or residential area, if you've got drug activity, it's going to dramatically affect quality of life. It's going to dramatically affect how well you're able to conduct business in that area. So when folks find that people are doing things and they're wanted for drug crimes and stuff like that, they call it into our tip line. We're able to act on that, get law enforcement agencies to act on that. Fugitives, people that are on the run from law enforcement agencies. We get a lot of information from agencies like BCA who are saying, well, we're looking for this individual or that. When we're able to get that information out to the public and they're able to call in those tips, makes a huge difference in being able to round those folks up and get them incarcerated, get them into the justice system. And then warrant violations. Warrants are a real simple thing. You go to court, you're supposed to pay a fine or whatever the case may be, or you're supposed to reappear and you don't, and a warrant is issued for your arrest. People decide they're going to ignore the warrant, and then typically they don't go on and become law-abiding citizens after ignoring the warrant. They usually go on and commit more crimes. Well, when folks go ahead and report that, we're able to get that information out. Yeah.
Just as a side note, do you know who the most common person is to turn in somebody with a warrant?
The spouse. Family member.
Ex-girlfriends. Be careful.
So if you have a warrant for your arrest, do not tell your girlfriend. Yeah, keep that private. But it's working. It really does work. Yes, web tips. This is where we have folks that are actually just responding through the internet. We have a website that folks can go to if they don't want to call or they can't call or whatever, they can go online and report tips. We get 76% of our tips through there. The call center collects 16%. This is a fairly active call center. We're talking about 16%. But they're actually triaging these calls, determining what are the valid tips, what are credible, that sort of thing, and getting that information out to law enforcement so that they can act on it. And then this is another one that's getting real popular, text tips, that sort of thing. Folks are inclined to use texting a lot more for everything nowadays, and we're actually able to use those for Crime Stoppers as well.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Doug.
Yep.
Questions that we get are, so where do the tips go? You know, where are they? Is it primarily in the metro area, or is it across the state of Minnesota? And if you look at the state of Minnesota, 39% of our tips go to the metro area. Now, I think Minneapolis and St. Paul are the #1 agencies that get tips, but they're larger cities. In non-metro area, 55%. Now, Rochester is one of the most active areas for tips because they've been ingrained, and they have Rochester Crime Stoppers down there. They have a vehicle that has the Crime Stopper logo on it, and Crime Stopper text phone number, and the website, and the regular phone number. And if they have a problem area where maybe they're getting cars broken into, they'll park that car in that neighborhood, and they get tips. It's great. Great idea. State agencies, so like the BCA, they get about 5% of the tips. So, when we talk to law enforcement agencies like Bloomington, right? What do we tell them? You know, the message that we have for them is we can help each other. #1, they can use our logo, right? Yeah, you've probably seen this logo on maybe crime alerts that have gone out. I know when the chief was introducing me, he said, you know, I retired about 5 years ago from Bloomington. I loved working for Bloomington, but after about 6 months, my wife said, get a job. So right now I work as a crime prevention specialist in Savage. In all of our crime alerts in Savage, it has the Crime Stopper logo. Because we want people to know that if you want to give a tip, call, go online, give that tip. If you want to remain anonymous, they don't have to use or ask our permission, but they can use that Crime Stoppers anywhere. One of the, you may remember when Officer Patrick was killed over in St. Paul, right? And the police chief went on camera that afternoon and he said, if you know or have any information about the whereabouts of our suspect, please call Crime Stoppers. And within 2 hours, we had 29 tips that came to Crime Stoppers. There were also tips that went directly to the BCA in St. Paul. And there wasn't any one of those tips that went to the BCA or to the Crime Stoppers that was the golden egg. But it was like a puzzle. It was pieces of the puzzle that led officers and investigators to find the shooter of Officer Patrick. Okay? We truly work together. We asked the law enforcement agencies to promote our tip lines and use it in their press conferences. And we also asked them to send us crimes that they might want to have publicized. We have a website. In fact, Mark, you kind of monitor the website and the social media end of things, right?
Yeah, we're on Facebook. You can just search Crime Stoppers of Minnesota. On Twitter, we're Crime Stoppers MN.
Yeah, yeah, good. You guys are lucky, right? You can, one of the things that people like is our media contacts that we have. We work with all the different major media contacts in the metro area. And if we go to them and say, hey, we've got a crime that we want to have publicized, because of our relationship with them, they're very likely to promote that. I did mention about KSTP. If you remember that Crime Stoppers television show that they had years ago, they've kind of replaced that and they've rebranded it. Now it's called You Solve. They do it once a month and they pick one of the crimes that Crime Stoppers is looking for the suspects for, and then they promote that. And I'll show you one of those videos here in just a little bit. So, how can you guys help? Number one, if you're aware of a crime, report it to the Bloomington Police Department. One of the frustrating things I know when I was working with Bloomington, I worked there in crime prevention, I worked there as a property crimes investigator, and it was very frustrating when there'd be a burglary in a neighborhood. And then I'd go out into the neighborhood and go door to door and say, hey, you know what, there was a burglary in the neighborhood. Did you hear or see anything suspicious? And it would break my heart when somebody would say, you know what, I saw this van, it had pulled up into the driveway and I saw them carrying things out of the house. I thought it was maybe DAV or maybe the guy's uncle or nephew that was picking things up. And they didn't call. They didn't call. We can't solve crimes that we don't know about. Please call and report crimes. Number two, you can donate funds to Crime Stoppers. We have businesses across the state of Minnesota that will kind of adopt their local police department and pay that $150 for that annual donation from police departments. You can donate funds to pay for Bloomington Crime Awards. So if there's let's say, some business burglars that are hitting your community here, and Bloomington wants to put out a crime alert and offer a reward, you can donate money for that reward, okay? Now, and we've got some details and things like that because, 5 years from now, where does that money go, okay? So if you have questions about that, we can talk about it later. But basically, you get that money back minus a small handling fee if we don't catch the guy. But doggone it, we hope we catch the guy, right? That's the whole purpose. Or you can donate funds to Crime Stoppers just to help us to fund the awards that go out to people. Over the course of, I think it's the last 5 years that we got that statistic, Crime Stoppers has funneled over 250 tips to the Bloomington Police Department. Over the course of the last, since 1979, over $8 million in awards have been paid out or authorized to be paid out to tipsters across the state of Minnesota. That's a lot of money. Interesting thing that a lot of people don't know is that about 30% of the funds that we authorize are never collected on. Sometimes people turn in a bad guy because they know it's the right thing to do, not because they're going after the reward. Okay? So, any questions before I show this video? All right.
Jim,
Yes.
I just wanted to point out that $150 membership fee for Bloomington is coming up in the next few months. So if anybody's interested in donating that for the Bloomington Police Department, you can get a hold of Jim or myself, and we'll show you how to do that. So just keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, and that's tax deductible. So, 17 years ago, this lady, Toni Bachman, was married to her husband, and she just disappeared. It started out as a missing persons case, but when they were investigating the case, they found blood that had been cleaned up and actually some bodily tissue throughout the house. So it became a murder case, but they never found her body. Her husband was always a suspect, but never arrested or charged. Last December, they featured this on USolve, on KSTP. And because of kind of bringing this back up into the kind of the forefront of the investigators and the community, they got tips. Tips that came through Crime Stoppers. And within about 2 weeks, they arrested her husband. And right now he's in prison for the murder of his wife. So this is one of those cases that we had a good ending for. There are some cases that are still open. We have about a $10,000 reward for the murder of Terrell in North Minneapolis. Was that 4 years ago? Yeah. About 4 years ago, he was killed in kind of a drive-by shooting in North Minneapolis. Now, Crime Stoppers authorizes rewards up to $1,000, but other people or other organizations can bump that up, okay? And that's why that award is listed at $10,000. We had another one just recently in Minneapolis where you may have heard of this, where a guy was walking into bars right after the early shift showed up to kind of open up the bar, and was robbing the bars in Minneapolis. And a couple of times he even fired off a couple of rounds in the bar. So a dangerous situation. They featured that on USolve with Crime Stoppers, and because of the tips that came through to Crime Stoppers, they caught the guy. Now, that's one of the few that we know who it was, only because he came to the Minneapolis Police Department and admitted to it. Any idea who he might have been? Not the name, but he had a connection with the guy. Several years ago, the tipster and the suspect were doing robberies. The tipster went to jail. The guy doing these robberies didn't. When the tipster got out of jail and he heard on USolve that his old partner was out there committing crimes again, I'll teach him, right? So that's why a lot of times the tipsters don't necessarily want to show up at the police department. They may not be friendly, but the thing is it works. And sometimes the people that call in the tips are people like you. Okay? They're people like me. They just want to live in a safer community. There's another study that's out there that talks about that the more a person feels that they have control in a situation, the safer they feel. Crime Stoppers is one of those ways that gives people a feeling of control. I have the ability to call and report a crime, to call and report a suspect, or get somebody arrested. I can be part of the solution and not part of the problem. So, I want to thank you for having us come in and talk today. Like I said earlier, Mark is on the board of directors with Crime Stoppers. He can answer questions that you might have when you see him at future meetings. Doug, who works at the Bloomington Police Department, same thing. If you have questions, you can go to Doug. You can contact me. We really do want to help make Bloomington a place where people feel safe and are safe. So let's work together. Thank you.